received for the border and the pandemic restrictions?
With ArriveCan, you mean?
Yeah, with
I mean, this is,
what do we make of
you
this?
know, I think it's really interesting that under we're sitting at a week now under Pierre's leadership, and now everything has changed. So it's really nice to see them listening to us. It's nice to see them listening to the people who've been saying this for a long time. It needs to go. And all of the people who have been wrongfully punished as a result of this, also there needs to be some accountability on the government for that. So people who were fined, people who have been flagged from the glitch, a lot of work still needs to be done.
So why is it that you think that Pierre Poilievre becoming leader of the Conservatives is the reason that the Liberals are could potentially be dropping the mandate?
I think he's a great leader. And, you know, he's proven himself under opposition. He's proven himself with his numbers, and they have no choice but to listen. The people have been crying this for a long time. The stakeholders have been saying this, and they're finally listening. So it's time to do it. It's funny they're not wearing them, though. So
what does the accountability piece look like when you say the people who are caught up in the glitches and punished, as you say, like what does that look like for you?
They need the people who've been wrongfully accused, wrongfully punished, wrongfully charged need to have justice brought to them, and the government needs to acknowledge the mistake that they made.
So just specifically, what would they be acknowledging though?
Well, they need to reverse it. So there are some constituents within my riding who have been flagged and they can no longer cross the border by a glitch that the Liberals did with their ArriveCan. And so they're flagged, and now they're going back and forth. They're made to feel like criminals, and they did nothing wrong. So that has to be corrected. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for your time.
The health minister is saying that he thinks there's a need for a robust and sort of 360 review of the government's response in the pandemic. What do you think? Do we need some kind of in-depth study, review, report?
Look, we've said for a while that we've had a lot of questions about the decisions that the government's made, and when they've made them, we've seen that they've been out of step with the provinces all along the way. We've heard just in the last couple of days media reports, nothing from government, that they're going to lift the ArriveCan app and the mandatory vaccination requirement at borders effective on the 30th of September. I'm not sure what's changed in their in the epidemiological evaluation of risk to Canadians that's happening on September 30th that hasn't happened today. So we know it's hurting our small businesses, border communities, tourism sector, all the days in between and all the days preceding, that they weren't aligned with their provincial counterparts in their risk assessment. So definitely would need to take a look at what the health minister is proposing, but it's there's a lot of questions that Canadians have why the government appeared to be making decisions not based on medical science but based on political calculations, political science for many, many months.
What do you make of the dental care proposal we're seeing? There's going to be $650 checks going out to folks who apparently need it. What do you make of that? Support it?
Look, the government's not proposing a dental care plan. They're going to be sending checks to some folks, and this is something that's clearly outside the jurisdiction of the federal government. Healthcare is a provincial responsibility, and on healthcare, the Prime Minister has refused to meet with premiers to discuss the healthcare situation in Canada for more than 2 years. And while we have regulatory changes that could be made, we have medical professionals not able to work within their full scope of practice in this country. There's lots of things the Prime Minister could be doing to address Canadians' access to medical care, Canadians who are dealing with emergency rooms that are closed, Canadians who are missing those care and screening appointments. The Prime Minister's not doing any of that. He's satisfying a power grab deal that he has with the NDP. So we have a situation in Canada where more than 70% of Canadians have dental coverage. We have majority of provinces and territories who have measures in place to support low-income individuals who need access to dental care. So, we're going to take a hard look at it. We're going to caucus about it today, but we need to be very clear that the Prime Minister is not proposing a dental care plan. He is going to be sending out checks at a time that our economy is in pretty rough shape, and Canadians are paying record high prices to feed their families. So if the Prime Minister wants to do something to address affordability issues for Canadians, instead of sending them a couple $100, he should address the real issue, and that's the rising cost of food. Canadians are paying between $1,200 and $2,000 more than they did last year. And so any of these checks that he's sending to Canadians are going to be vaporized with the effect of the inflationary
But some
policies
would
that he
argue
has.
that having a check helps. You know, it helps cover the bills you have to pay.
Yeah, look, whether it's $10, $50, or the $650 proposed here, when people are on hard times, when they're having a tough time making ends meet, the money that the government, the checks that they're sending, will be welcomed by some folks. The problem is that that money is not going to go as far as it should. The number one way that this Prime Minister and his coalition partners could help Canadians, give them real relief, is by committing to not raise taxes and committing to not introduce any new taxes. We have payroll taxes that are going up on January 1st. The carbon tax continues to go up. We have a situation across this country where furnaces are going to be clicking on this week and next, and people are going to be making even tougher choices about what they can put in their grocery.
I think that's something in the future. I mean, right now people are earning right now. They have a hard time paying the bills now. So what would you do to deal with the rising costs?
I immediately scrap the carbon tax, which is going to be crushing people when they get that first heating bill at the end of next month and throughout the winter. That's going to make a real difference. That's going to make a real difference for Canadians immediately.
So, okay, but the payroll tax issue, I mean, what you're actually saying, they're not payroll taxes, they're contributions to EI and CPP. Are you saying that the government should no longer fund EI and CPP? Because those are pretty big programs that Canadians rely on to help meet the rising cost of living.
Yeah, we're at any time that Canadians are taking home less money at the end of the month and it's going to the government, it's a tax, and the government can choose when they're collecting that. But what this government has failed to do is realize the situation on the ground that Canadians are facing across this country, and that's not been part of their calculation, that they're not able to afford to feed their families. 4 in 10 Canadians are making tough choices every time they go to the grocery store about what they cannot put in their cart this week that they put in the cart the previous weeks.
Can we ask you what you think of the NDP ads, saying that you guys are not in it, Mr. Poilievre is just in it for himself?
I think it's an interesting commentary when we have a situation where the fourth party in the House of Commons is so worried about the focus that the new leader of the official opposition is going to put on helping working Canadians and helping them succeed, that he's got his eye on the next election. The leader of the NDP is obviously very worried about his fortunes in the next election. And so that tells me that perhaps he doesn't think that Mr. Trudeau is going to be honest in keeping his commitments to have their coalition stay together.
You guys are stealing some electors from the NDP.
I think that it's really an interesting question when we have Canada's Conservatives who are speaking in such a way to working Canadians that that the fourth party in the House is running ads against us on the morning after our new leader's been elected.
I just want to be clear. So the Conservatives, they do not like this dental care proposal. You reject it. You object it. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, we're going to caucus about it this morning. I think my comments are pretty clear that it's not a dental care plan. These are stimulus checks that the Prime Minister is sending out, but. We have to ask ourselves, when we're looking at healthcare in this country, it is squarely a provincial responsibility. So the question to the Prime Minister, to the Health Minister, why are they going around the provinces and delivering healthcare services that not a single one of the premiers has asked the Prime Minister for? That's a great question when the Prime Minister is back from his road trip. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
You talked about the border measures possibly being changed, the ArriveCan app.
What's that?
The Trudeau government is apparently looking at potentially getting rid of the vaccine mandate.
Long overdue.
Come talk to us about it. Why is
Just
it long
step
overdue?
forward for a second.
Long overdue?
Why?
So can we get the
Well,
audio?
I've had a number of constituents that haven't seen their parents who live elsewhere in the world for over 2 years. Was that fair to them? So finally, where is the science in this? There is no science. Finally, they have wakened up because we have a new leader, and the polls are not favorable for the Liberals. So now, guess what they did?
Why do you think
Something they should have done a year ago.
Why do you think it has anything to do with Pierre Poilievre?
Have you looked at the polling?
Well, how does this issue connect with polling at all? I'm trying to understand.
Why do you think?
I'm asking.
How
you.
many young people have come out for a new leader? I mean, they're in trouble.
Are those young people coming out because of the ArriveCan issue? That feels.
Well, there's the other issue. There's the other issue. Our tourism industry is on its knees right now, thanks to this government not allowing people to come into this country. On the other side, the Toronto Blue Jays are good, so they're home openers now in the playoffs. They can welcome players from Philadelphia, from New York, and Seattle now. Isn't that good? We finally have a level playing field in this country for Major League Baseball.
Thanks. What do you think about ArriveCan getting ditched?
I think it's fabulous that they've made it optional. I hope they obliterate it, because at the borders this has caused a huge issue, big reductions in Americans coming over for tourism and economic activity, so I'm happy to see it gone.
And the vaccine mandate being potentially dropped?
You know what, I think that's appropriate at this point. The COVID levels are quite low, and I think we've seen that even with vaccines, people are still getting it, but less severely.
Why do you think they're doing it now?
Well, I think it might have something to do with the science changing Saturday night when Pierre was coronated.
Oh, Ms. Guzman, can I ask you about the ads from the NDP?
The proposal with respect to the GST credit for low-income earners, it's we're at a time when Canadians are struggling. We have people who are just hanging on by a thread, and we've been calling on the government to take meaningful steps to address this affordability crisis that are facing Canadians. Now, this is not one of the steps that we asked them to take, but giving people a break on their taxes is one way to do that. So the crisis that we're facing in Canada, this is very much a made in Canada liberal inflationary crisis, and Bill C-30 is a way. We don't believe it's the best way, but it is a way for them to address some of the challenges that folks who are the most hardest hit by this affordability crisis are facing. With respect to the Bill C-31 that the government is advancing to stay in power in cooperation with their coalition partners, these checks are not a dental plan, and that's what they promised. What they're putting forward is squarely into provincial jurisdiction. They are effectively going to have to borrow more cash to send this out the door, and it's going to have the effect of raising inflation in Canada. So this is going to diminish the benefit of those the GST rebate increase that one-time increase that they're going to offer in Bill C-30. So really, they're giving with the right hand and taking with the left, and so it's disappointing. And so we can't support a measure like that when, frankly, it's not clear who the government's intending to help other than themselves to stay in power.
To be clear, your Conservatives will not be supporting either bill.
We will not be supporting Bill C-31.
How about the other one?
We'll speak on it in the House. As I said, we don't believe that it's the best way to do it, but we have been calling for the government to offer Canadians real tax relief. And if this is what it looks like when the Prime Minister is starting to pay attention to the affordability crisis, we'll take that up in the House and may support it.
Just to go back to the tax relief, the question I was asking you earlier, Mike, about your party's call for, I guess, a freeze to the planned increases. That's what you guys are asking, right? A freeze for the increases planned, or
right.
No more increases at all, ever?
Well, right now the government should not. We need to have a government that's ready to eat what's on their plate, and that's an inflationary crisis. So they should not be increasing taxes. They should not be introducing, new spending unless they're going to find those savings somewhere else. So the situation that we have, where we'll be in the middle of a winter where people can't afford their heating bills unless they're sacrificing at the grocery checkout line to be able to make ends meet. That's not the correct time for the government to top up CPP and EI premium takes by the federal government.
Doesn't that just solve the problem, maybe in the short term, but create a bigger one long term? If you're not increasing the amount of revenue going into CPP or EI, those are programs that Canadians draw down on. So then there's less money going forward for pensioners, for example, who need their CPP. So that cannot be increased, let's say, with inflation. Not enough money in the pot.
Well, the government They're facing that issue with those accounts today. What we are seeing is the government is taking record amounts of revenue on the backs of Canadians with increased those increased revenues because of higher prices, inflated prices. They're getting that at the fuel pump. They're getting that at the grocery store, and they're getting that when people pay their home heating bills.
Is that a line in the sand for the Conservatives then? Like, unless the government offers up these freezes or however you want to characterize it, you will not be supporting the affordability measures?
Well, we're going to have to take a look on a case by case basis what the government's presenting. But Mr. Poilievre's been crystal clear that that they have spent the cupboards bare. And then spent their neighbors' cupboards bare. And so they cannot continue to introduce new spending while also raising taxes on Canadians because it's only having the effect of driving up inflation and making life more unaffordable for Canadians.
Mr. Trudeau will be going to the funeral of the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe next week. So he'll be skipping the House of Commons for 4 days again. And this week he skipped 3 days. So what do you make of that? Beginning of the House, return of the House, new leader, Mr. Trudeau is away on almost the first 2 weeks.
Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that we're seeing a response from the government on a number of files that we've been very vocal about, that Mr. Poilievre has been very clear about. Again, media reports, though not through the government, we're hearing that that their failed ArriveCan app is going to be is no longer going to be mandatory at the end of this month. The ineffective and unscientific mandates that they have at the borders, those are going to be lifted as well. And now we're seeing that they're starting to pay attention to the affordability crisis that is facing Canadians. So I expect that the Prime Minister is looking to put a little time and distance between some of those things before he has to face off against Mr. Poilievre, who's speaking for Canadians, speaking for their for their retirement, speaking for their dreams of home ownership, and instead they're hearing nothing of the sort from Mr. Trudeau.
And what do you make of the NDP's attack ad yesterday? That was pretty unusual for the NDP to launch an attack ad against Mr. Poilievre on the first day.
Yeah, I think I think it's odd when we have a situation that the fourth party in the House is attacking the official opposition instead of the government. But that speaks to their self-interest with with their coalition partners in the Liberals. But look, the NDP is not speaking up for working Canadians. They're not speaking up for the affordability crisis that Canadians are facing. They're propping up a government that's fueling this inflationary fire. And so it's no wonder that when Pierre Poilievre and Canada's Conservatives are frankly saying that that we're going to continue to check their homework and we're going to speak up for Canadians, that of course when that's going to compromise his coalition, that he would be out against that. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for stopping.